The wind came first, no gentle whisper, but a raw, howling grief that shook Sophie May Whitlock's cabin to its bones. It moaned through the chinks like an old man mourning his youth. She sat by the hearth, hands around a cup of bitter Corey. No tea left in 3 winters, no sugar either. Only salt remained in her bones. Outside, the world was white again. Snow blurred the horizon, burying fields, fences, and the barn under ghostly weight. The silence was so deep it felt like the earth had died, and sometimes Sophie hoped it had. Once, she had loved storms. When Henry was alive, they'd race to shutter the windows, laughing through thunder. They'd curl beneath blankets, their baby between them, while winds screamed like wolves denied a meal. That was 5 years ago. Fever took the baby, then Henry, then the neighbors, and finally, hope. Now Sophie wore Henry's shirts and patched skirts, her wedding dress reserved for Christmas, hanging like surrender from her shoulders. Her hair, once curled, now jagged, chopped with dull scissors when the world stopped deserving ceremony. That night she moved through her cabin like a ghost, chopping wood, pouring half-frozen water, feeding the stove out of habit, not hope. The silence had a scent, with smoke, vinegar, old wool, and despair. But this storm was different. The air itself felt watchful. She thought this might be her last winter, not from hunger, but from absence of purpose. Some nights she spoke to the snow, asking why it hadn't finished what it started. She never expected an answer. Then one came, a knock, soft, then louder, 7 measured raps, deliberate as a heartbeat. Sophie froze, eyes on the door. No one had knocked in years. The last time, a deputy searching for a runaway boy. She'd fed him bread and lies. Her hand trembled as she touched the latch. Bandits, drunks, or ghosts. She drew a breath and opened the door. 7 men stood outside, shadows against the white. Tall, fur-draped, snow-heavy, Comanche, she thought. Bone chokers, braids, eyes steady. The foremost man stepped forward. Broad shoulders, scar along his chin, snow melting on his skin. "We seek shelter," he said. His voice was deep, low, steady. Sophie's pulse quickened. They carried no visible weapons, no threats, only weariness. The storm clawed behind them. She stepped aside. Inside, the air changed. They removed boots unasked, crouched by the stove, their silence respectful, not oppressive. Sophie ladled stew from the root cellar's last remnants. The scarred man accepted his bowl gently. "Thanks," he murmured. "No other word?" she asked. None needed. They ate slow, like men who knew hunger's edge. One braided his hair, another carved bone, a third cleaned his hands with snow. They weren't raiders now, just travelers with miles in their bones. Her eyes returned to the scarred man. His face wasn't soft, but clear, like someone who recognized her silence. "There's space in the loft," she offered. "We sleep on floors," he said, though his men had already rolled out their furs. Still, she brought quilts, Henry's mother's work, laying one over each sleeping man. When she reached the scarred one, his hand closed gently over hers. Not a grasp, a promise. She withdrew, heart thudding alive again. That night, the storm howled and branches snapped, but the fire burned bright. 7 strangers and 1 woman kept it alive with silence, not words. By morning, the scarred man stayed behind. The others gathered more wood than she'd ever seen. When she brought him her last cup of tea, he offered a carved stone hawk in return. Their fingers brushed again. She wanted to ask why he stayed, why he carved that, why his gaze felt like recognition. She said nothing. He smiled. That evening she sat by the fire, carving in her lap, warmth flickering where cold had once ruled. Outside, the storm died. Inside her, something stirred. Sophie woke before dawn. The stove whispered its last breath of coals. For a moment, she thought it had all been a dream, until she heard the rhythmic chop of an axe outside. She opened the door to find him there, bare-chested despite the cold, hair tied back, muscles shining with steam. He swung the axe with calm precision, not to impress, but because it needed doing. "You'll freeze," she called. "No," he said, driving the blade. Cold keeps a man honest. She smiled faintly and went inside, warming porridge with hidden bits of apple. The men rose quietly, folded furs, and waited for bowls. The scarred one sat near her counter. When she handed him his bowl, their fingers brushed again. Neither pulled away. After breakfast, they worked without being asked, mending the barn, shoveling paths, fixing the chicken coop. Sophie watched in wonder. Comanche men, feared by settlers, treating her home like sacred ground. By noon, clouds thinned to dull silver. An older man carved bone on her porch, nodding silently as if to say, "We mean no harm." She thought of what neighbors might whisper, a widow housing warriors. But she didn't care. Those same neighbors had watched her roof sag and her baby die, offering only prayers instead of presents. That evening, one of the young men placed a carved buffalo head by her fire, a gift. Sophie's throat tightened. Later, the scarred man approached. His gray eyes caught lamplight, filled with untold stories. "You're not afraid," he said. "I was," she replied. "But not now." "Why?" "Because none of you have taken anything you didn't ask for." He nodded. "Then we're not what they say." "Neither am I." The silence between them softened. "Your name?" she asked. "Two," he said. "Sophie May." He repeated it softly. "Sophie." The way he said her name felt like prayer. That night, to slept near the door, back turned to the storm, as if guarding her from ghosts. For the first time in years, she didn't dread the dark. It felt like safety, not grief. In bed, she held the stone hawk close. Loneliness, she thought, wasn't death. It was waiting for someone who wouldn't demand her silence, only share it. She drifted off to the sound of the fire and Two's breathing steady below. When the knock came again, not on the door, but her window, Sophie rose. To stood outside, calm, wordless. She opened the window. She opened the window to a hush. The storm had passed, leaving the land clean and cruelly bright. Snow draped the hills like linen on the dead. To motion for her to come outside, she wrapped herself in Henry's coat and stepped barefoot into the drift. It stung like truth. "You should be sleeping," she whispered. "I dreamed you were leaving," he said. She smiled faintly. "There's nowhere left to go." He studied her face in the faint light. "There's always somewhere." She didn't understand then, but the way he said it lingered all morning. By noon, the others were gone, vanished silently, leaving only footprints in stacked firewood that reached her waist. To remained. "They'll meet me by the river," he said. "You should go," she told him. "You've done enough." "I will when the thaw comes." He stayed through January. Snow fell and melted, fell again. He taught her to set traps, to carve, to mend leather. She taught him to read words off Henry's old Bible, though he said he preferred stories that walked instead of sat. Sometimes they spoke of loss without saying the word. He told her how soldiers burned his village, how his mother died in spring. She told him of the fever that took her child. Their silences spoke more than their tongues. One evening, she played the old gramophone. The record cracked, the voice inside ghost-like, but to listen as if hearing the earth breathe. When it ended, he said, "Music is what the wind tries to say when we ignore it." She laughed, her first real laugh in years. He looked at her as if that sound alone could heal a century. By February, the snow softened. Streams began to murmur again. Sophie felt herself thawing too, the ache of years loosening its grip. Then came the men. 3 riders, deputies or worse, appeared on the ridge, rifles slung, badges dull beneath the clouds. "Ma'am," the tallest called, "we're tracking hostiles. You seen any Indians pass this way?" Sophie's heart slammed. To stood behind the door, motionless. She forced her face calm. "Only the storm," she said. "You're welcome to check the barn if you think the snow breeds enemies." The man spat. "You live alone, ma'am?" "I did," she answered, "until you came asking foolish questions." He stared long, suspicion flickering. Then he nodded to his men. "Let's go. Nothing worth freezing for." They rode off. Sophie's knees gave way. To caught her before she fell. His hand trembled once against her back. "You could have let them take me," he said quietly. I've lost enough. That night they said nothing, but something in the air changed, an understanding too fragile to name. Days passed. The thaw deepened. Water ran beneath the ice like secrets freed. To sharpen his knife, repaired his satchel, and watched the river grow restless. One morning, he stood by the door, coat slung over his shoulder. "It's time," he said. Sophie froze. "Will you come back?" He met her eyes. The hawk returns when it must. She stepped closer. "Then I'll wait for it." To smiled small, almost shy, and pressed something into her hand. A strip of red cloth. "Tie this to your door when you no longer need to be alone." He turned and walked into the melting snow. She watched until he vanished among the pines. Spring came slow but steady. Shoots pushed through the thaw. The cabin breathed again. She repaired the fence, planted new seeds, painted the shutters blue. Some nights, she swore she heard footsteps near the stream, but when she looked, only wind moved the grass. Then, one morning in late May, she found a hawkstone on her windowsill. A single feather lay beside it, caught by dawn. Sophie tied the red cloth to her door. Years later, when travelers passed through and spoke of the widow who lived on the edge of nowhere, they said she was no longer haunted. Her laughter carried farther than any bell, and a carved hawk guarded her door. Some said a tall stranger came every spring, silent as dusk, and left before sunrise. Others said she conjured him from snow and sorrow. But those who knew the truth never told it. The truth was simple. She survived the storm, not by enduring it, but by letting it inside and finding, within its howl, another heartbeat beside her own.